Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. This week, I'm really excited to bring to you something totally different, a new genre, a new world. That is the world of fan fiction, and specifically Dramione Fanfiction, which pairs Harry Potter's villain, Draco Malfoy, with the series heroine, female lead, and Harry's BFF, Hermione Granger. And I was so lucky to be joined in this episode by a fellow RVA book lover, Jaclyn Wilkins, and she explained to me, and now to you, all the ins and outs of the Dramione fanfiction world. Jaclyn is the owner of The Bookmark, Richmond's online mobile bookstore, and she's a stay-at-home mom whose favorite hobby, reading, turned into her dream job. She loves fantasy and world-building books the most and is always happy to recommend them to her customers. In her store, you'll find new releases, pre-loved books, and bookish merchandise, all available at local markets in Richmond, Virginia. You can find details about her shop on her Instagram at the Bookmark Box, and she's eager to meet more book besties, so be sure to stop by and chat with her about your favorite books. We talk about at the end, but she's going to be at the Lakeside Love Fest Farmers Market on February 9th, so be sure to find her there. Our drink this week comes from Fiction and Fizz. You can find them at Fiction and Fizz on Instagram. Jaclyn reached out to them to pair the perfect drink for Draco and Hermione's angst and romance. It was a fire whiskey. It was amazing, so delicious. All right, without any moment's pause, let's get right to the episode. All right, here we go. Okay, so Jaclyn,
yes.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Excited to be here.
So we've been talking for a minute about you coming on or doing some kind of collab.
Yes.
And so exciting to make it happen.
I know.
And then you said you wanted to do Dramione. How do you...
Dramione.
Dramione.
Yes.
Fan fiction.
Yeah, we're going to talk some fan fiction today. I definitely want to just kind of cover the basics. There's some etiquette with fan fiction.
Okay.
We're going to talk about my favorite fan fiction, the one that's most popular right now, all within the Harry Potter genre of fan fiction.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Dramione. So that's
yes.
Draco and Hermione fan fiction.
Yes, Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter series.
Yes. And I have to tell you this. I usually try to research or read it or... Mm-hmm. With this, I felt so far behind that I am 100% relying on you.
Because where do you start?
I have no idea.
That's why I'm here.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. When did you start reading this?
Yeah, so I actually started reading fan fiction when I was in high school.
Okay.
The Harry Potter series have lived with me my whole life. Mm-hmm. I went to the midnight releases for the books and the movies. My 4th grade teacher, shout out Miss Summerall in Alabama.
Love you.
Read the books to us, did all the voices. You know, back before we knew it was Hagrid and you got read Hagrid, those kinds of things. Aww. So it's been ingrained in me. Mm-hmm. And my love for the series has only grown as I have grown.
Yeah.
I most recently just took my dream trip to Scotland in October and did all the Harry Potter things while reading my Harry Potter fan fiction. So that felt very surreal. So I started reading fan fiction then. However, I kind of had this resurgence after my son was born. Mm. I was in the throes of midnight feedings and 3 a.m. feedings.
Mm-hmm.
I just needed to stay awake enough to be able to focus on feeding my son, but also not pass out. And so I started reading again on my Kindle at the time. And so I think it was the beginning of 2022 when I heard about the fan fiction for Harry Potter kind of getting a resurgence. I dove into TikTok, and then at the beginning of 2023 is when I discovered this one story that just kept getting so popular on TikTok, and everybody's talking about it, good and bad. And it was called Manacled by Sin Yu. And it sounded super intriguing and very different than anything else I'd heard about. So I dove in, and I've been on fan fiction since. My husband jokes, will I ever read a physical book again? We'll find out. I have read physical books since, but yeah, it's like always interspersed between the fan fictions I'm reading.
Okay.
So yeah.
And I do want to dive in, like, so fan fiction, I think there might be some listeners that aren't even familiar with fan fiction.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that
Absolutely.
for a second? Yeah.
So fan fiction is a common person, someone who loves a story, a book, a movie, anything, fell in love with the story, fell in love with the character, fell in love with the world, and decides that they want to explore it more. So, for example, I could read the Harry Potter series and think, I don't want this series to be over, and I want to write more or see more or read more about somebody in the story and explore it a little bit longer. So a lot of fan fiction is someone who has taken a character they love and either turned it into a scenario where they're able to make that character fall in love with the person they thought they should be intended for. Or, maybe they survive a battle that they didn't survive in the story. They fall in love with somebody that they were not intended to be in love with. Hence this. Yeah. So that's kind of where fan fiction is born. Fan fiction covers all types of stories. The most popular one I think that people are familiar with is 50 Shades of Grey. That's actually a Twilight fan fiction that was sold and made into, as we've seen, like a multi-million-dollar success story. And with the story I'm going to talk about today, with this fan fiction genre of Harry Potter and specifically Dramione, there is one that is getting traditionally published this year, and it's one of 4 that's being traditionally published this year. Okay. So it's just as successful as something like 50 Shades of Grey, and it's only getting more successful something was announced this morning, so I'm excited to be here to tell you all about it.
Yes.
So fan fiction can be anything you want and start anywhere you want. The idea is that you are not starting with a blank slate, though, for a normal story. You're starting with something that another author created and gave you the basis of.
Okay, yeah. And you mentioned, like, there's etiquette around it.
There is some etiquette. Okay. So some of that I'll cover, too, with, like, the traditional published. So while we're talking about stories that'll get made this year, Manacled that I mentioned by Sin Yu has been picked up to be traditionally published. Okay. And what that means is she wrote this online, and now it's going to be made into a physical book or an online book that you can purchase in store, like your big box store.
What pulled you in about, I guess, Manacled or the Dramione?
So Manacled got me on the Dramione fanfiction subgenre. I'd read other Harry Potter ones, but this was the first that I'd read that was really like Draco Malfoy, Hermione Granger focused. This story and the premise of it is an alternate universe. So in this story, Harry Potter is dead. In the aftermath of the war, in order to strengthen the might of the magical world, Voldemort enacts a repopulation effort. Hermione Granger has an order secret, and for those of you who are familiar with Harry Potter, that's Order of the Phoenix. It's lost but hidden in her mind, so she's sent as an enslaved surrogate to the High Reeve until her mind can be cracked. So the author was very heavily influenced by The Handmaid's Tale. So if you're familiar with Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, it's a surrogacy program so they can repopulate, and there's like this concept of why can't they do it themselves and how we got there. In this story, the idea is that the pureblood families have some kind of curse on them. They're not able to populate, babies aren't surviving. And so with the captives of the end of the Battle of Hogwarts and end of the war, Voldemort has decided to use the women who survived as surrogates and are sent to these pureblood families, Death Eater families, to help repopulate.
Okay. That's very dark.
It's very dark, which is why, it's going to sound crazy, but that's what intrigued me. I've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah.
I've read, Handmaid's Tale. I've even watched a few episodes of the show, but I was like, I've never heard anything like that. I don't think I normally would have been so drawn to the material because of the dark themes in it. But so many people were like, oh my God, I love this story. I remember seeing a video of someone on TikTok saying there is before Manacled and there is after Manacled. And I was like, well, that is a hook. You got me. I want to know what that means. And now that I know what it means, oh man, she's so right. I will say it is a very dark book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of heavy themes. When this was posted online, it was posted on a website called Archive of Our Own. It's familiarly called AO3. So she posted on AO3, and something about AO3, which is a website for fan fiction writers to put their works on, is you're allowed to put trigger warnings and tags.
Okay.
So I might open up a chapter and it says, hey, heed the trigger warnings, heed the notes at the end of the chapter. And in that it might say, there's blood, there's gore, there's, you know, in this story, there's suggestions of sexual assault. There's actual depictions of sexual assault. There's tag warnings for things of like self-harm and suicide. So these are not light themes. And I don't want anybody going into this story with the idea that I'm just going to read like another Harry Potter book. That's not what this is. I would almost advise that if you're diving into fan fiction, this is not the one for you to start with.
Okay.
I know that's crazy because I'm coming on here going, hey guys, let's talk fan fiction. And I'll tell you about this one you should not read. I will give you one that I think you should start with. But for Manacled specifically, I do think there's a time and place everyone can read a story like this. Yeah. I just want to be careful. I'm not going to tell anybody in the world that this is a romance story. There's romance involved. Books A Million even posted the publication, like the traditionally published book that's coming out in the end of the year, with the headline, The Greatest Love Story Ever Told. That's interesting. That's a way to get people. And to be fair, she had to change some details to publish. She can't include anything from Harry Potter or that would be a copyright issue.
Okay.
But that's not how I would describe the story at all.
Okay.
There's romance, sure. It's a Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger story. But this is not like, I'm not going to read this thinking this is going to be something like The Notebook. I'm not going to read this thinking this is A Court of Thorns and Roses. This is not your traditional romance Emily Henry book. I love all of those stories.
Yeah.
I love them all for different things.
Yeah.
That is not this.
Right.
All that to say, this is one of the most beautifully written things I've ever read. And there are quotes and lines that have stuck with me forever.
Okay.
Many of the people who talk about it online, the very last line of the book is the book that gets quoted the most.
Okay.
And when I read that line, just for a personal note, I sobbed for 20 minutes. My therapist has heard about it. We've had a full conversation about, Jaclyn, you're not allowed to reread this book until we can dive into what happened with that 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
It just resonates.
Can you say, what is
Yes.
it? What is it?
So the last line of the book is, she was a non-active member of the Order and she did not fight.
Aww.
And this is a story about Hermione Granger and how the Battle of Hogwarts didn't go the way we planned, how she continued to fight, how the war prolonged. She's a healer. So there's some discussions about what is appropriate to do as the good side versus the evil side. You know, if I kill a bad guy, I'm not a bad guy because I was doing it for the right reasons. Right. But if they kill me, they're a bad guy.
Right.
And so that kind of complexity and insight comes from Hermione while she's discussing things she wants to do. You know, she wants to use dark magic because she's as a healer. She's like, come on, we're having to deal with all the after effects of people with curses and hexes on them coming to me and needing to be healed. And Harry, who's kind of leading the charge, is like, yeah, but we're not like them, so we're not going to use the same spells.
Okay.
Well, it's having great effect on the winnings and losings of the battles that they're going through. You know, there's a scene where, I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but there's a scene where they capture a spy. And Hermione's brought in to heal them after they've tortured them. Well, why are we torturing people if we're not the bad guys?
Yeah.
So a lot of that is called into question. I think as a very general, broad statement, this book does a very good job of creating commentary on how history can always be skewed or inaccurate based on who wins. I think it's also a deeper dive on how society views women and their work and their work in a war, and those, even not including women, but those who do not actively fight, and how their stories are told or not told, and what pieces they include and don't include.
Yeah.
And so when you follow Hermione through this war and her efforts to do more and be more and give more, and then you get to the end of the book and you've now read everything she's gone through, and you now see, you know, things that have happened. I'm trying to tread very carefully and not give any spoilers.
Okay.
But when you see more and more and more of what occurs, it's a very lengthy book. When you get to the end and you read, she was a non-active member and she did not fight, oh, it's just heartbreaking because what do you mean? Of course she fought.
Yeah, it's Hermione.
It's just a different way.
Yeah.
And of course she fought. Draco Malfoy is introduced in the middle of the story, kind of. And Hermione is propositioned that there is a member of Voldemort's high-ranking Death Eaters that has turned and wants to meet with one of the members of the Order to provide the information he gets, but wants someone of value and importance to make sure that he's going to survive. And so they offer Hermione, and Hermione's like, okay, I agree to do it. And it's always implied from the moment that she starts meeting with this person who turns out to be Draco that she is going to have to be willing to do some things that she doesn't want to do. But Hermione being Hermione, I'm self-sacrificing. I do for those I love around me.
Yeah.
Because I love them and because I want what's best, what does it matter what I go through? We learn later that Draco is also the person who turned, and he has his own kind of ideas about what self-sacrificing means. I think anybody who's read the Harry Potter series can kind of dive deep on what it means to be a child of war. I think Draco's an excellent example of, like, let's really think. Because he was 16, he was the youngest Death Eater ever.
Right.
Bare minimum, he's just scared to die if he doesn't do what Voldemort asks him. At the most, you know, it's because he cares about his family. He's been raised a certain way to think that this is what we do, and this is what you do to survive no matter what. And Hermione is just the opposite and antithesis of it, but doing the same things. This is what you do to survive. This is what you do to not die. This is what you do to protect your loved ones. Yeah. And so when they meet, those ideologies come into question with each other, and that's where I'll leave you. Okay. On that story. But yeah, I think knowing what I knew about the premise of the story and how people had spoken about it, and then hearing that last line, I'm hooked. And that there's before and after, I'm hooked. I have never been one to shy away from a heartbreaking story. You're not going to find me the one to go, no, I really don't want you to tear my heart out and stomp it on the floor. I want a book to do that, please, every time I read. That's what we're here for. This book definitely did that. But again, I think there's a time and place for everyone to read it. Just know that it's heavy. Yeah. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have two questions. First, so who are the characters? We know Hermione and Draco. Is Ron alive?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes and no. There's points to the story. So because the premise is it's an alternate universe, Harry is dead. That's the very first line you'll read.
He died in the Battle of Hogwarts.
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
That's the idea, right? Okay. He died. So I'll just say that, I mean, the war continues through this story. Okay. So there's more battle scenes than were in the Harry Potter series. There's more political talk with the Order of the Phoenix that didn't exist in the Harry Potter series. The Harry Potter series is the basis of the story. It's what creates the world. It's what creates the original timeline and the original characters. And Sinlin Yu took that and ran with it, as most fanfiction people do. Yeah. Harry is there. Ron is there. You're going to see familiars like Luna and Jenny and the Weasley brothers. You'll see Shacklebolt and Severus Snape. You'll see...
Snape's alive in this?
You'll see Umbridge at a point. Okay. There's some flashbacks of Hermione dealing with him and stuff. So things like that. Okay. Yeah, Snape's alive in this. Okay. And, you know, when we get to the point where there's a surrogacy program, Umbridge is leading part of that. Okay. So we all love to loathe her.
She's the worst.
Oh, if you feel the cut while you're reading it. Okay. You're like, oh, wow, I didn't think I could hate you more. Yeah. Sinlin Yu wrote this book in 3 parts. So when you first read it, you meet Hermione at the end of the war. You meet Hermione when Harry has died. You meet Hermione when she is now realizing, we have lost. What are we going to do? What do I do now? And it's right at the beginning of where they start the idea of, like, the surrogacy program. She's put into her placement with the High Reeve and what that looks like for her.
What is the High Reeve?
So it's just her title for the highest ranking Death Eater. Okay. Right? So, like, we might call it a general or something like that in our world. So the High Reeve is what she named it. And then that first part of the series is just you coming to terms with how Hermione is existing. Like, there's holes in her memory and why. Mm-hmm. And they, Voldemort believes, well, she must have some secret, because why would Harry's best friend have holes in her memory on purpose? She's clearly done it on her own. Mm-hmm. So that's part 1. And part 2 is flashbacks. That's where you're going to see everything that led up to the point where the war ends. Okay. And part 3 is where it all comes together. Okay. Sinlin, you wrote this in a way that you read it for the most emotional effect, not in a chronological way. However, people have taken those chapters and put them in a chronological order and said it's even sadder than the original. Oh, no. Well, because now you're realizing, wow, we're getting to this point after I know everything I know. Mm-hmm. And the first time you read it, you don't know all those little tidbits and secrets and connections and relationships she's made. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a class example of excellent writing, excellent structure. It just goes to show how incredible Sinlin Yu is, that she was able to take such a dark, heavy material that from the get-go you think like, no, that I have no interest in that. Mm-hmm. And even reading it, you're like, wow, this is really heavy, but her writing is so beautiful, I never put it down. It just keeps you locked in. Yeah. You want to know what's going to happen next, and you want to know more.
Yeah. How do you read it, since it's fan fiction?
Yeah, so I read it online. I download it to my Kindle, which anybody
like a
can
PDF?
do. Yeah, PDF, or you can do a quick Google search. They'll show you how to download the right file for your Kindle. Okay. It's called like an EPUB or a Mobi. Yeah, so you can do it. This is a hefty, long one. It's over 800,000 words.
Okay.
Yeah. So think the length of the ACOTAR series or the Throne of Glass series. Like, it's long. Yeah. I commend the people who have read it in 48 hours. I don't think they stop to breathe, eat, drink, anything. Because it's super long. It took me a whole month to read it. However, I want to give kudos to the author. She wrote this while she was a stay-at-home mom on her notes app on her phone.
Really?
While her child napped.
Wow.
800,000 words on a notes app is a lot of trust in an Apple device.
That it's not going to crash.
Right? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, she did something I think a lot of stay-at-home moms can resonate with, which is, oh, you did it while you still did everything else.
Yeah.
Her son was very young. My son was very young. So I was able to resonate on that aspect too, like learning later, oh, I'm at home reading this while my kid naps. You wrote this while your kid napped. We're one and the same. Yeah. We're just all out here trying to read or write about the things that we love.
Right. And I mean, not to get too specific on like the phone thing, but that resonates with me because it's like when you're a young mom, you always have the baby in one hand.
Yes, and your phone in the other.
Like I didn't write an entire book, but I read several books, and I couldn't like hold a Kindle, but I could swipe on my phone and do ebooks, and that's all you have.
I had my Kindle behind my child because my Kindle had a pop socket. Okay. So, and Kindle had dark mode. You're sitting in that dark room, you don't want to wake them up.
Right.
And so I had dark mode on my Kindle, reading this story while my kid napped. It just, I can't commend her enough to be able to do something like that. That's insane and
absolutely
awesome.
Yeah, and to have it now. And so so now talking about reading it too, and now I'm just like getting curious about, so now it's being traditionally published.
Yes.
Where can readers find it between now and September?
So when a fan fiction gets picked up for traditional publication, these authors can't have this story online anymore, right? Because then what's the point of a profitable book if you can still read it for free online? But not only that, with fan fiction specifically, they need to change things that are copyright issue. So you can't have any mention of Harry Potter, the Harry Potter world, anything like that could be picked up and go, oh, so you just stole a story from someone else. So with this traditional publication, she will have to have had changes to probably the world, all the names, things like spells and drinks that are from Harry Potter. I'm sure she's had to do some plot points that are a little bit different. So while this story that's getting traditionally published under the name of Alchemized.
Manacled is now going to be called Alchemized.
Yes. Okay. So Manacled's the online version we've all read and loved, and Alchemized is the traditionally published version coming out later this year. Okay. I think the official date is September 30th. Penguin Random House and Del Rey are already announcing. They've published the little blurb on the back. They published the cover art. Avondale, who did a lot of the artwork for Manacled Online on AO3, has been commissioned to do some of the artwork inside the book.
Oh, cool.
So that's really awesome. But yeah, it's going to be a similar story. It won't be the exact same down to the T, but it will be very similar. And you could go ahead and pre-order it. Came out from pre-order yesterday.
Okay.
Just the first thing I did, I woke up at 7:30 in the morning. I was like, oh my gosh, and bought it before I even got out of bed.
You're definitely going to read it. Yeah. So I'm guessing the blurb is not from J.K. Rowling.
No. I think a lot of people already have their own conceptions of the type of person J.K. Rowling is. And I don't think she's the type who would be excited to see that there's fan fiction of her works being published.
Yeah.
All this to say, Tom Felton has been caught on numerous occasions frequenting places that are popular from these fanfiction stories, reading some blurbs from fanfiction stories. Yes. He just got questioned on a panel about if he likes certain fanfictions.
What did he say?
He mentioned that he did not like the Harry and Draco ones that put them together. Oh. He was not asked a follow-up of if he likes Draco and Hermione. However, if you follow him Instagram or see anything where people have tagged him, he always puts those little, like, pop models of Draco and Hermione next to each other whenever he does them. So we know he knows.
Oh my God. That's amazing. And just for the listener, Tom Felton was the actor who
played Draco Malfoy. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So I think this is the point now. Speaking of things you cannot talk about in Alchemize or the drinks.
Yes.
So we do have our drink today, which is fire whiskey, which is featured in the Harry Potter books. But you suggested it, and I know it's from a friend of yours, so I didn't know if you wanted to speak.
So I reached out to a girlfriend on Instagram who runs a account called Fiction and Fizz.
Okay.
And she makes all kinds of cocktails based on popular books. So she's done like the Court of Thorns and Roses. She did Crescent City. She's done a couple Throne of Glass ones now. I think she just did one on one of the Kingdom of the Wickeds. I could be wrong. But yeah, so she just makes these fun drinks.
Oh, fun.
Based on these storylines. She did Nesta's Revenge, I think is what she called it, or Nesta's Cauldron. And it's a cauldron and it has like the middle finger coming out of it, which if you're familiar with the story, you'll know what that means. But yeah, it was really cute. So I reached out to her and told her that I was doing a podcast about Harry Potter fan fiction and what kind of drink I could do. And in these fan fictions I've read, fire whiskey is always the drink they mention when it comes to like an alcoholic beverage. Where you and I would read a current romance story and they talk about, oh, he poured himself a gin and tonic. This is their version in fan fiction for Harry Potter at least. So yeah, I mean, fire whiskey, I just went ahead and was like, okay, well, it has to be that because it's mentioned all throughout Manacled.
Right.
And Fiction and Fizz went ahead and made the drink for us today.
Yeah, and I have to think that I'm, like, obsessed with this.
Yeah, I'm actually going to try it right now for the first time.
You try it. It's just Fireball whiskey, which has the cinnamon taste to it.
Oh, my gosh, this is really good.
I know.
I was like, oh, I won't like the whiskey part probably.
No,
I could easily chug this.
It's so good. So it's Fireball whiskey, which I don't normally drink, but anyway, and pineapple juice.
It kind of tastes to me like an apple cider, like a chilled apple cider.
Yeah,
it's got like that like almost clove to it.
Yeah, it's very. It's really good.
It is very good.
Dangerous.
Yeah,
I think I did 2 ounces of Fireball to 3.5 ounces of pineapple juice, sort of.
Oh, that's dangerous. Probably like the real thing in the books.
Yeah.
Super good.
It's very good. And then I did take... So these... I wanted to try to get, like, Gothic... It was hard to find, like, Gothic goblets. But this is sort of... I got them from an antique store, so...
Look like they'd come right out of Malfoy Manor.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Yeah.
I was with my girlfriend in the store, and I was like, does this look like it would, like, be in Harry Potter or, like, Game of Thrones? And she's like... Yeah.
I think Draco Malfoy would drink out of this. Okay, thanks. Just had to double check.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, the fire whiskey cocktail is really good. So thank you to Fiction and Fizz. We'll definitely give them a shout out cred.
Yes.
For that. So loving it so much. So what are some other things that you like are really wanting to share with?
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of these fan fictions, specifically ones that are getting traditionally published this year, there's a couple more.
Okay.
So Julie Soto has had other works of hers already published.
Okay.
Some of her more notable ones in the last year are ones based off of, like, Kylo Ren and Rey from Star Wars.
Ooh.
So she wrote a fan fiction and that got published. So she has one coming out this year called Roses and Chains. It's a fan fiction that was called originally The Auction. The premise, again, another dark story. Alternate universe. Harry doesn't win. And in this version, it's like the survivors, female and male, are put up for auction by Death Eaters. And you can pay as much as you want to get whoever you want. It's like a bidding war. And Hermione is purchased by Draco.
Okay.
But it's not for the nefarious reasons we think.
Okay.
So this story is also very long, but one of the best ones I've read. It's excellently written. It's very well done. Plot, points, pacing. I'm trying to find the right word to describe it, but I'll just be honest. It just changed my perspective of, like, what it looks like for women to fight. I think there's a dialogue to be had about a lot of things in current events and what it looks like for us to fight just for our own, bodily autonomy, for our own space, our own ability to speak. And very similar to Manacled, where, like, you see that's kind of stripped away. In the auction, you see Hermione Granger have to decide what really needs to be spoken of about and what needs to bide her time, who she can trust, who she can't trust, and how that all looks under this guise. So that's being published. It's actually, in essence, she wrote a bunch of different fan fictions on this premise. So there's another one that accompanies it called The Right Thing to Do.
Okay.
And a part to that called All the Wrong Things. The first one is a Hermione perspective. The second one is from Draco's point of view. These two stories, I think you should read before you read the auction.
Okay.
Because they have, like, little Easter eggs by the time you get to the auction. The first two are fluffy. They work at this consulting group, and there's witty banter. And it's like, oh, I see her at the bookstore. And, Draco has a different date of the week. And Hermione's like, but I don't even like him. So, very almost contemporary romance in that regard. And when you get to the auction, it's a much darker story, very different. But there's, like, little sentences and lines that you're like, oh, that was from the other story. Oh, she's wearing the same dress. Oh, like, things like that will get you. In the first two little stories, All the Wrong Things and The Right Thing to Do, there's a moment where Draco's talking about, which girl he's going to take out for dinner that night. And Hermione is kind of bantering with him. Oh, I can't remember. Is this for your Tuesday night or your Wednesday girl? And when he is visiting her at the bookstore where she works on Saturdays, he calls her Saturday girl. This book that's being traditionally published, called Roses and Chains, by the same author, Julie Soto, announced her dedication page today that says, for the Saturday girls, specifically as a nod to the people who read the story before it was traditionally published. So that's
sweet.
Kind of why I'm so passionate about it. I mean, these are great stories, but to imagine for a minute that you and I are sitting at our coffee table in our living room writing something just because we love it and we want to share it with other people because we haven't seen anything like this. I really wanted my character to end up like that, and just taking the time to write as much as they've written.
Yeah.
And then have it published. It's like, well, you broke my heart on a Tuesday afternoon just because you felt like you needed to tell this story. But these are people who may not get the accolades or the rewards that a traditionally published author would.
Yeah. But tons of fans, I'm guessing.
Tons of fans. It's a huge community online.
Yeah. You mentioned AO3. I mean, is that where a lot of the community, like, talks are there?
Yes. AO3, Wattpad, those kinds of places are where you'll see a lot of fan fictions being published. I mean, I know there were at times when I was in Facebook groups where it's like, I just need a recommendation, and you'll get 15,000 of the same or of all the new ones you've never heard of. Manacled, The Auction, and a third story called Secrets and Mask are considered, like, the top 3 dark Dramione fanfiction stories. Secrets and Mask, again, because it's dark, it's a premise that Hermione is a soldier fighting for the Order. She's captured by Draco, and there's, like, a story that develops from there. good and bad things, found family, enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
I think more people need to know about it because I have never sat down and wrote anything the length of an 8-book series before just because I feel like it. Just because I think today I'll write a chapter that, covers 2 characters that I kind of like.
Yeah.
And let people online critique it or hate it or love it. Just because I want to share it with the world.
Yeah.
And then if they're successful in some regard, they'll get talked about all the time online. If they're successful in another regard, they'll be picked up for traditional publication. Or they'll just live in infamy online forever. But I'm hoping by coming here and talking about it, more and more people will discover it.
Yeah.
And it will get the success I think they deserve, however they determine that success looks like to them.
Right. From your perspective as someone who really likes, fan fiction, obviously, I might be going on a limb. You might be, into indie publishing.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. What are, it sounds to me like there's more community also in that world versus, a traditional publish. Am I wrong?
Yeah, right? I think you're right. I think there's also some etiquette that goes to fan fiction. And I think that's what builds and continues community. So with fan fiction, you can, but you shouldn't review it the way you would a traditionally published book.
Okay.
These people don't go through an editing process. There's not a first draft and a second draft and a 10th draft. There's no one looking over their shoulder and going, yeah, but that really doesn't drive the point. Or you already said that 3 times. Or there's a plot hole here. You don't have anyone looking over their shoulder and giving them that guidance. And so they could write this like Sinlin Yu in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day with her napping child and just publish it the next day with, hey, I hope you like this.
Yeah.
So with fan fiction, you don't typically review it. If you do review it, it's in these community groups, like a Facebook group or on TikTok, where someone will just go, oh my gosh, this broke my heart, or oh, it wasn't really for me. But you're not going to see someone go, the writing was terrible. I hated this character. Why would she write? Because you didn't have to read this.
Right.
Just like any other book, I think if I were to go into a Barnes & Noble and pick up a book,
right,
I wouldn't necessarily go on Goodreads or something like that and go, why would you write about them?
Yeah.
Well, because they wanted to.
Right. 100. I mean, that's sort of my thing. I'm not interested in you telling me you don't like something. Come and tell me why you love something, or you don't have to read it. Nobody forced you to.
There's good critical criticism.
Sure.
But I think it needs to come from a place of intellect. And that's the difference, I think, with this fan fiction. We all know, and man, oh man, has it really changed me. I used to be the type of person who would read a book, and if there was a grammar issue, it took me out of the story. But now I read fan fiction, and there's a grammar issue every few pages.
Right.
Because they're just writing on a laptop or their phone before they publish it.
Right.
So you just kind of get over those types of things.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, wow, I have never thought about myself in this kind of light that this character is now thinking about. With Manacled, Hermione Granger goes through a lot of changes in a short time frame. And you have to put yourself in the character's shoes and go, would I do the same? Would I do different? Do I feel a disconnect with her because I wouldn't do the same things, or I would do those same things? Would I make the same choices? Why can't she understand? Why do I understand? Things you would do with a traditionally published book, but to see it with an author like this who just took the time to write something. Like I joked earlier, you broke my heart on a Tuesday afternoon and you were just writing something for the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. With fan fiction, there's other rules, like you can't sell fan fiction.
Okay.
So because this didn't go through that editor process, because this is copyright, you do not sell fan fiction.
Okay.
So bookbinding got really popular in the last year on Book Talk with people wanting to bind their favorite fan fictions, which I'm all for. You want a physical copy on your bookshelf of the story that wrecked you, please do. But you cannot sell it.
It just has to be for your own use.
Yeah. So sometimes you'll scroll on the Etsy and you'll see someone selling it, and I ask everyone who's listening to please report them. You just hold down the image if you're on the Etsy app, and it will give you the option
to report it.
Yeah, because the person selling it isn't the one that's going to get in trouble.
Right.
The author's going to get in trouble. Because now there's someone who is out there profiting off of copyright And that author is going to be the one who now has to deal with the repercussions and take their story offline and will probably be the person that goes, oh, then I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And we don't want that.
No.
We want to foster more stories and more writing. And that's why the community, I think, is so close, because we're also the type of people who are like, shut it down. I found somebody who's breaking the rules. And this is all to say you're going to be a newcomer in any kind of community you're not familiar with.
Right.
You know, so if you, I didn't know that and I've bought one, that's okay. We know now. Maybe just go back to that person and go, thank you so much for making this. I'm glad I was able to get it from you. I've now learned this isn't something we should do. Would you be willing to take it down? Just a simple, hey, and if they say no, and and tell you to mind your own, okay, well, you did what you're supposed to do, and now you know the right thing to do. And so we move forward with the right rules, and you can buy the traditionally published ones that are coming out.
It's just a few more months.
You can learn a new skill, bookbind for yourself, and make your own beautiful version.
I didn't even know about this.
So I'm working on one right now. The one I mentioned, it's the right thing to do. I'm starting there.
Oh, cool.
As my first.
Okay.
And so, and it's a skill that I can translate to traditionally published books.
Okay.
There are people online who can do book bindings, new bindings of traditionally published books and sell those. They're considered special edition, limited edition kind of things. You just can't do it with fan fiction because that's a copyright issue.
Oh, okay. Very cool. You have been so gracious while my cat is mewing behind. I'm just going to go feed her real quick.
Yeah.
So, and
I'll
also,
charge this too.
Yeah, so for the listeners, Jaclyn's been so cool and my cat is losing it. I'll be right back. So, okay, cool. Well, I mean, it's a lot. Yeah, I did not know all that stuff.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about fan fiction or the story?
Yeah. So because I went so deep into stories that you should not start off with, I'm going to go into one that I think you should start off with.
I love that. So
this is actually my favorite. So because we covered fan fiction and we covered Dramione fan fiction and we covered like the dark stories, I want to give one that's a little bit lighter. It's almost the same length, so not quite as long as the other ones I've mentioned. And I think this is probably the most beautiful story I've ever read. This one's called Green Light by Serene Musafir. And I hope I'm saying that right.
Okay.
I could not find much on them online. I found like one post about them on AO3 where they have 2 works out, including this one. But Google search, TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff, couldn't find much on them. If you're listening and you find out more and you want to share it, please do. I would love to sing their praises and promote them as much as possible because I think this is the story that needs to be published. This feels to me like the story that you read that lives with you forever because of the certain lines and quotes in it. And I have a few with me.
Yeah.
But basically the premise of the story is a journalist sits down with Draco Malfoy, who vanished 8 years ago, for his story on why he disappeared and what happened. It's told from the perspective of Hermione. The journalist follows the story of Draco and Hermione on an expedition to look for a mythical cave in the aftermath of returning home. I think this book, the first part of it, is Harry Potter meets the Mummy.
I love that.
So
sold.
There's an right. So we all know how the Mummy affected us.
Yeah.
So this story starts off very much like 2 people needing a change in their lives, go on an expedition in the desert, and witty banter ensues, and craziness ensues, and magical things happen, and will they discover the cave and all that. I think this is a great place to start fanfiction-wise for Harry Potter fanfiction, because the premise of it is still very canon to the original series. So it's 8 years in the future from when the Battle of Hogwarts ended, but nothing from the series that was originally published has changed. So Voldemort did not win, Harry won. The people and the players that we expected to live and not live are the same. In the beginning of the story, everyone is exactly who you think they would be. So Harry's a head Auror. Hermione works for the Ministry. Draco Malfoy is an ex-convict. He spent some time in Azkaban. Lucius Malfoy spent some time in Azkaban. So things like that. So starting in this story, you're not having to completely change everything you remember from Harry Potter. So I think that's a good place to start. The second half of this book, I cannot describe in an analogy to something else. I thought on this to try and come up with something for you today, and I was like, there's just nothing like it.
Okay.
I don't have anything. I think a good way to describe how well this book is what my reactions were like
all right,
while reading it. I paced. I thought about throwing my Kindle a couple times.
Oh.
I cried over being angry, and there wasn't even anything to be angry about except the line that she wrote on a Tuesday afternoon that broke my heart. I'm like, how dare you?
Yeah.
This isn't fair that I just read this while my kid was napping. And like, what do you mean I have to go on with life like nothing changed?
Yeah.
Because it's a Hermione, Draco and Hermione do end up together, but it's the epitome of a slow burn. Almost the slowest of burns. But the reward is in the wait.
Okay.
It's in the journey. In this story, Hermione is who we think Hermione should be. So she is an eldest daughter. Right. She has immense love and empathy for others. Mm-hmm. She bears the responsibility for others. She doesn't always acknowledge her own sacrifices, and neither do the people around her. She's constantly asked to be more and give more than she should have to. She's self-sacrificing, and she's very critical of herself. I think a lot of people reading that can probably...
Are you sure this wasn't about me?
Right? It's fair. It resonates, right? Because you're like, so thank you for describing me in a paragraph. And then we meet Draco. Uh-huh. He's the tortured son who had to make difficult decisions for the safety of himself and his family. He's also self-reflective and very critical of himself and the things he had to do and the person he is now. He is also self-sacrificing because he knows who he is and he knows the perception of himself. And so he doesn't want to allow others in because he knows exactly who he is and what he's done. Mm-hmm. So Hermione and Draco have that in common. Mm. I know what I've been through. I know what I'm willing to do for others, and why would they stick around for me? Mm. I think in this world, you'll get those heavier themes, but not as dark as the other ones I've mentioned. Like, you'll get things like our place, our purpose in the world. Mm-hmm. What is our intention with the way everything we do comes to fruition? There are a little bit of heavier themes, so just trigger warning. There is talk of self-harm and suicide here. Mm-hmm. But I think to put this in a box like fan fiction is a disservice to this story. Mm. This reads to me like the ones you're going to read in your English class that live forever. Okay. One of the quotes I would love to read to you is, "Grief was, after all, just the imprint in the sand left behind by love, and time the water that wiped away its trace. And this grief that sticks to the palms of their hands, the tissues of their heart, it won't be there one day." Mm. What do you mean you wrote that in your kitchen? Right? Or another one that I think just kind of sums up why I love Dramione. This was in there as well. So, quote, "People can be written for each other, their stories intertwined in unimaginable and wondrous ways." So I get a lot of laughter from my husband, who's like, "You're going to read the same story again?" Yes, I'm going to read the same story again because it's never the same. Right. But I think fan fiction is great for those people who pick up a book in Barnes & Noble and try to decide in that, 2 to 5 minutes they're holding that book, do I want to start this? Do I like this world? Are these characters interesting to me? Do I like this magic system? Am I really invested? Or they bring it home and they get 2 or 3 chapters in and they're like, I don't know. You don't have to do that with fan fiction. You know the characters. You know the world. You know the magic system. Yeah. So restarting another fan fiction just feels like, well, I'm just starting with things I know I already love. I don't have to decide 30% in if I'm going to keep going because I just think this character's whiny. Mm-hmm. Or I just don't like the way they keep calling them dragons when they're really wyverns, things like that. So
getting close to home here.
Yeah. I think this story is the one people should start with if they listen to this whole podcast and listen to me, talk about all the things I love and the stories that I want to hear more people talk about, read. Yeah. I think this is where you go. Okay. Green Light by Serene Musafir. All right. I think the imagery alone that she does is unmatched. Right. Unmatched and unreal. I mean, she even has moments in her book where she is giving you monologues or perspectives from characters who are not actively in the book. So this is not a spoiler. Mm-hmm. Draco is dealing with his own self-reflection. And then maybe a chapter or 2 later, you're reading a paragraph and another paragraph, and you're like, oh, we're actually in Lucius's perspective.
His dad.
His dad. Mm-hmm. And now you're starting to see the similarities of the things they've had to go through, or the dissimilarities in how they acted in the same scenarios provided to them.
Oh.
But that character's not actively in the story.
Right.
But, I'm resonating with someone who has had no scenes in this book.
Yeah. Wow.
Or I'm angry at someone who's had no scenes in this book. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never read anything like that. Where I've been like, oh, I'm so mad at this person who isn't even here.
Wow.
Or I'm, oh my gosh, I can't believe they had to make that choice off screen.
Yeah.
I didn't even watch it. I just was alluded to it.
Yeah.
And remembered it and thought about it. And now I'm mad about it or I'm sad about it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I think when you look at stories that we've read or heard and those love quotes that resonate with you, I think this will be one of the ones that comes up.
And green light.
Green light.
Okay.
Green light.
All right.
Yes.
Very good. And we're on my last question, but I kind of think you just answered it, which is like, who would you recommend this for? But you said just a moment ago, the type of person that wants to just kind of live in this world that they love.
Yeah, I think for me, that's certainly how I was re-engaged into it. I love Harry Potter. I used to read fan fiction, but even if I hadn't, this sounds like an interesting story, and I've always loved these people. Why not give it a try? Even if you're not a huge fan of Harry Potter, I think there's something to be said about a new story you haven't heard. Maybe it's a character you're familiar with. I certainly think that gives you a little bit of a leg up when reading fan fiction to know what's happened in the books or the movies.
Sure.
It's not at all a requirement because the stories, at least that I've mentioned, you don't need to know anything prior to start. They'll cover it.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, good. Well, it's for everybody.
I really do think so. All that to say, but watch trigger warnings.
Sure.
Because those earlier stories I mentioned that were darker, they're not for everyone.
Yeah.
Please don't be the person who goes, oh, there's a trigger warning about, self-harm, but I'll be okay. It won't affect me this time.
Yeah.
And then to read it and it does hurt you, I don't want that for you. Or to read it, it hurt you, and then you to go find this author and critique them when they gave you that heads up.
Yeah.
I don't think everything in our world needs trigger warnings, but I think there is art that has an intended audience.
Right. Yeah.
And so maybe we're not the intended audience for some things.
Right. Okay. Well, I love that. Thank you. And now is there anything we can shine a spotlight on for you or?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to come and talk fan fiction with me anytime, you can find me in my mobile bookstore. So I own a mobile bookstore called The Bookmark. We are local to Richmond, but I like to say that we're Virginia bound. We'll go anywhere in the state. I carry new releases, pre-loved books, book merchandise. So things like bags, bookmarks, of course, blind dates with the books, t-shirts, stickers, all that good stuff. I always make sure to have what is the most popular or current, release on my shelves. But if there's ever a time you walk in and I'm not busy and you see my Kindle in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and assume 9 times out of 10 I'm reading fan fiction. And you are welcome to ask me about it.
Oh, cool. And so do you do events?
Yes. So I travel mostly to local farmers market. So my most recent ones and the next one I'll be doing is at Lakeside Farmers Market.
Okay.
So I'll be at Lakeside Farmers Market for their Love Fest on February 9th. I believe it's from 11 to 3.
Fun.
Yeah, so come on and get stuff for Valentine's Day. I'm going to have book bouquets, which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a bouquet of flowers with books in them. So the book reader in your life will absolutely want that. Yeah. It's like a more personalized bouquet for you. And there will be different versions. So your dark romance, your current romance.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm normally at local markets. I do public or private events. So if you're interested in doing a baby shower, bridal shower, a wedding reception, can do that as well. Yeah. I came from the wedding world, so I'm very familiar with how those things run and would love to, set up. We can just open up the store for your guests to come in and pick what they want. Or if you're like, no, it's my wedding and I want to offer my 3 favorites or mine and my new husband's favorites, or I want only romance books or only children's books for my baby shower, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been really cool to talk with you. And like I said, I did not know much about fan fiction coming into this.
Most people don't. That's okay. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. Thank you for letting me come on here and yap about the stuff I love most. I mean, Harry Potter's one thing, but now the fan fiction world, it's Yeah, I could go on and on and on and on. Yep, and you can find me on social media at the Bookmark Box.
Yes.
Instagram, Threads. You can come complain if it wasn't what you wanted. Or you can come tell me you love it too, and we'll gush over it.
Okay.
I think anybody who's ever loved a book wants to hear you tell them each and every chapter, what you're thinking, how it's going, and I am that girl. So please, bombard me. Tell me you love Greenlight. Tell me you can't stand Umbridge. I feel you. I'm here. I got
it. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, and love the drink. This has been a blast.
Yes.
And with that, we will... Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.